force committees. So here we've got Jackie Rule, with Renee Green, Scott Brown, Brandon Sherman, and I'm Paul Barton. And we've got a presentation for you all today, and this presentation is a summary of the engineer's report that we received on the pool basin out here. So it covers the basin, it covers the bathhouse, and it covers the infrastructure that supports the pool, which includes the filter house and everything that's under the north end of the pool. Okay, so we're just going to start. This presentation is not all-inclusive. I encourage you to get a copy of the engineer's report and read it when you can, or you can go through it now if you want to. But this is just a summary that's going to hit the highlights of the things that we know about the pool now that's been verified with the pool. So with regard to the pool basin, the first thing that we've got is the entry ramp. And I heard someone comment, I think it was you, ma'am, about how the entry ramp is perfect, or it's a really nice ramp, or someone commented on that.
I did.
Okay, yeah, okay, you did, I'm sorry. But the issue is that slope is no longer ADA compliant. And so it's actually, you have to have what's called a zero entry slope. And that basically means the water just, you can just basically walk into it for a certain way. There's a certain slope. I don't know exactly what that slope is. But if you look at new pool construction, and that's what this is going to have to fall underneath, is that you have to have a zero entry to the pool. And so it's very, very shallow and gets deeper as it goes on. The dive basin is no longer in compliance with current pool coding. So if we were to maintain this structure, there would no longer be a diving board, because you can't dive down in that pool anymore. It's just not the right depth and shape. With regard to the floors and the walls, I think you guys, I don't know how many people made it down into the pool to see the posters we have hanging up there, but there's lots of deterioration. I'm going to go through some quick slides here. Here's a picture of the ramp. I think everyone knows what that is. Here's some of the wall deterioration that we've got going on, and some of the floor deteriorations up next. But you can see this is right there by the ramp where the wall is deteriorated. This is on the east wall where there's actually a separation, and this section is bulging into the pool. And then this is over here on the west side where there's deterioration up there where the patches need patches on that portion of it. So, then this is some of the flooring. This is a picture here. There's one with my feet in it. This was a patch that was probably done in the 90s, and then the deterioration has just continued around it, with the older concrete. This is a patch here that was also done in the 90s, and you can see that there's cracks in it as well. When the pool was in operation, the last year it was in operation, it was losing 22,000 gallons of water a day. And it was going through the cracks and the seams, and some of that was evaporation, but it's not a very small portion of that was. Now the bathhouse, this is considered, we had some architects that evaluated this that are with the historical, what group are they actually with, Scott?
The Oklahoma Historical Society.
Okay, Oklahoma Historical Society, and they came in and said that the historical aspects of this facility are the bathhouse and the gazebo, and that's what they saw as meaningful structure. The bathhouse would have to be brought up to ADA compliance, which is wheelchair access. The bathrooms would have to be reconfigured for that purpose. Any hallways that would exist would have to be configured for that purpose. Everyone knows about the step that's by the blue doors back there. That would have to go away, because you can't have a step of that nature for ADA compliance. These hallways are too narrow. There's no room on the corners for a wheelchair to spin in a full circle, which is one of the requirements for ADA compliance. And so this facility would have to be remodeled to reach ADA compliance. Now, in the engineering report, the engineers recommend that a structural evaluation be done on the facility. And there's cracks that are in different places. Like you can see a crack up here that kind of goes all the way around. That crack is actually a cold pour joint. And what that means is they poured the walls, and the walls set up, and then they poured the ceiling, and it left the seam. And that's all that is. And that's common in construction, especially in the 1930s. That was a common thing. And you can actually see similar cracks on the gazebo out there, because that's exactly the way they fabricated that structure as well. So they're not really considered a structural issue, but I think you can see there's places where water has run in through those. So the filter building and the infrastructure that supports it. Just to summarize, the filter tanks that are in there have completely failed. And I've been in the room, and I've been on the tanks and looked into the tanks and been under the tanks, and there's huge flakes of rust that you can just pick off with your hands on the outside of the tank. The westernmost tank, there's literally a hole where it's completely rusted through, and there's a crack propagating out of that hole. And all the tanks are in very, very distressed conditions. You know, and they actually, it appears that they have not even been in use in recent history. And that'll get us to the last item here in a minute. But the building structure that is the filtration house, which we're talking about the north end of the pool, that structure is hazardous. There's failed beams, there's cracks everywhere, and we will, when we're done with this presentation and done with the questions, we can take anyone down there that wants to see it, and you won't be allowed to go into the room because it is a very dangerous situation, but you'll be able to see just about everything from the doorways looking in about what's going on in there. So the piping in that room is severely rusted. The pump is relatively new and it's serviceable. The strainer that comes on that pump is what they use to replace the 4 large filter tanks. And that strainer is about that big around, it's about that deep, and it's not adequate for 500,000 gallons of water. So, and it was being run by like a 3/4 horsepower pump. It's just not an adequate situation there. So here are some of the pictures here. These are the tanks, and you can see just looking at them, you can kind of tell they're in distressed conditions. And there's actually, these are the 2 westernmost tanks, and there are 2 other tanks on the east side that are in the same type of condition. The easternmost one has a huge bulge in it, where it's sitting in concrete saddles, and it's bulging in the saddle. It's visible, you can see it.
Are those chlorine tanks?
That's they're sand filters, is what they are. And so they run the water through it and filter the water through those tanks as their original purpose. And you know, this item over here, this is on the north wall, right when you look in, and there's exposed rebar here where it's cracked. There's cracks in the walls here, chunks flaking out. And then actually, on the westernmost beam, it is really cracked all the way down. And it's a twisting type of failure that's been added to it. So you can actually see, and if anyone wants to go down there and look at that, we'll certainly go down there and look at that. On the next slide, we've got, this is a picture of piping that is inside the pump room right now. That's what it looks like. And all this equipment that we're showing right now, this is all original stuff from when the pool was fabricated in 1939. So this stuff is over 80 years old. You know, this is the interior of a filter tank, and it's just everything is rust that's in there. This is one of the beams that's holding up the deck down there, and you can see there's chunks that have come out of it. There's exposed rebar, there's a crack in it, and this is not the worst one. Just about every beam, I want to say there's 6 of them, if I remember correctly, and just about every one of them has a crack of some kind in it. But the ones that are on the west end are the worst, and I think this is the second one in. And this next slide this is the beam, that's the westernmost beam over there. And you can see how it's displaced right here. And one thing of interest is this displacement has grown since this committee has been working this project. It was not this bad a year ago. So there is movement that's happening currently. And you can just see how it's separated, and it's really just barely hanging there at this point. So with the pool deck and the features of the deck, when we talk about the pool deck pitch, which is the angle of it, it's supposed to slope away from the pool. There are sections of the deck that are sloping into the pool, and that is a problem, and that would have to be corrected. The water slide is in good shape. It needs some maintenance. It just needs some bolts tightened and some things tidied up on it. It would be something that potentially could be reused. You know, that there are tripping concerns in the deck, and you can see these. There's actually lots of cracks in the deck, but most of the cracks are not tripping concerns. But there are some that have cracked, and there has been displacement, and there are tripping concerns. And you can see these. This one right here is a tripping concern. That one is a tripping concern. You know, this one is as well. That one is where I believe that one. I think that one's the north. No, that one's the north deck where it transitions. And there's actually a little ramp that's cast in there because it's displaced so much. At some point in time, they put a little ramp in there to, you know, level it out, I guess. So 1/3 of the pool basin is distressed. I don't know if you've noticed, I mean, all the orange spray paint that's on the pool, those are markings that the engineers put down when they were evaluating the pool. We had to go over them again with more spray paint because they had faded out a little bit. We wanted everyone to be able to see them. But on this visual right here, this is in the engineering report. There's also a large blow-up of it that's hanging out in the wall of the pool. And all the gray areas here are areas that failed the acoustic test. And the engineering report tells you how they conducted the acoustic test, but it's basically they used a chain or a hammer to strike the floor, and it makes a certain sound if there's delamination in the concrete, which means that the concrete is separating in between in the slab, or there is a void that's underneath the pool. I would expect there to be quite a bit of voiding underneath the pool with as much leakage as that shell has had. Because every day, 22,000 gallons of water was flowing through those cracks, and it's going somewhere.
And the ground settles. Anytime the ground settles, you're going to get cracks.
That's right. That's right. And this pool, if you look at these speckled areas right here, you can see those right there. You can see those in the pool. Those were repairs that were done in the 90s. So and you know, the records aren't real clear. Sometime in the 1990s, they repaired some of the cracks in the pool, and at the same time, they also they redid the plumbing for the pool. You can see in the deck where they cut chunks out of the deck, and they redid the piping, and they covered it back up with concrete. So that did happen. So the pool gutter. Now the gutter is all the way around the perimeter of the pool, and it varies 2 1/4 inches around the perimeter. And we actually had the engineering company come in with a transit and measure it. And you can see on the pool itself, there are red marks every 10 feet. And that's where they took measurements. And they took 52 measurements around the perimeter of the pool. And wherever they started at a point that they determined was 0, 0. And then they documented the deviation at each point. And you have to understand, these measurements are in feet. So it looks like they used 110 and 0, 0. So wherever, if there's 0.1 of an inch, like if you look at station 10, it's 0.1, that's 1.2 inches of deviation. Okay? I hope everyone's kind of clear on that because it's kind of confusing. But to get the full deviation, the ones that are in parentheses are negative to the 0, and the ones that are positive to the 0. So if you take the largest negative one and the largest positive one and add them together and then multiply that times 12, you get 2 1/4 inches. And that's what the deviation of the gutter is. Now, sorry for the math lesson, Gus.
Didn't know if you had to know math.
Yeah. But all this information is in the engineering report. And the current construction requirements, the levelness of the gutter needs to be plus or minus a 1/16 of an inch. So there can only be an 1/8 of an inch deviation, and we have 2 1/4. And it clearly states in the report that 2 1/4 inches does not include areas where there's pieces of the guttering gone. That's actually stated in the report that way. So this is not, there's a chunk gone and that's the low point. That's not what happened here. So it's just out of level. And the problem with that is that it does not allow the pool to skim properly. So the water is not recirculating properly in the pool. The chemicals aren't getting dispersed correctly in the pool. Only about 1/3 of the pool is being recirculated because the gutter is so out of level. So that's the challenge that we have there. So they did do a pipe pressure testing to check the plumbing, because that was actually, I was very concerned that the piping was what was failing, was causing 22,000 gallons of water a day to leak through it. But what we found was that the main drains passed the pressure test, the recirculation plumbing passed the pressure test, and this is the new stuff that was put in the 1990s. The filter room plumbing failed. I mean, that's obvious by the pictures that we have. The gutter drains themselves could not be tested because there was some distortion on one of the gutter vents and they couldn't get it to seal. And so they couldn't get that one gutter to seal. So they actually couldn't test it. But their suspicion is that the guttering is probably okay because it was put in the 90s as well. So that was one of the positive things that we weren't really expecting. So the recommendations from the engineering report is that due to the deterioration of the pool, replacement is recommended. The bathhouse is salvageable. Now they do want the structural evaluation to occur, but they feel like that and what they've stated to us is that the problem is with a repair is that in 10 years we'll be right back here again with the exact same problems in the basin, because wherever you patch it, the deterioration will continue because the bulk of the concrete out there is 82 years old now, and it's just past its lifespan. So the task force has recommendations that we've made, and we feel like that the pool basin and infrastructure should be replaced. The bathhouse should be remodeled to meet ADA compliance, and grants and private funding should be pursued to fund this project. And that's basically, I mean, there's a letter. The letter on the front of it is our letter that we wrote to the City Council and to the Parks and Building Committee with our recommendations and our evaluations. So you can read that as well. Now, we can open it up for questions now, if people have questions.
What kind of grants are available possibly?
Well, I think there is a matching funds grant that is, I think it's agriculture, isn't it? I think that's agriculture. Okay. Okay.
Water resources board.
Okay. So that there are matching fund grants available. And so that's and kind of what we feel like the strategy should be is raise money through private donations and then find the matching fund grant to go with it to double it. Yes?
I think the bathhouse is anything to keep as an antique. I mean, I'm an antique anyway. I used to teach swimming here, but that bathhouse isn't very nice to begin with. I don't know why we'd want to keep it like it is, even with the ADA compliance. It needs to be beautiful because a lot of people just bypass going to that bathhouse because it's so kind of creepy.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but there will be additional surveys of the community to determine how we're going to proceed with what we end up with. I mean, right now we're at the point we have to decide which way are we going, and really our committee's work is almost done. There's going to be another committee that's going to replace us that will take the next steps on how we proceed.
Well, is this price just an estimate, or is that?
That is an engineer's estimate, and that's high. There's a large estimate in there, over $3 million. That came from the engineers. Those are always high estimates. One of the things that we've done is we've reached out to Hennessy. Hennessy has a new water park. And the way they funded that with the sales tax. And their sales tax it times out once the money's raised. So as soon as the money's raised, it's timed out. But they determined that they wanted to spend $2.1 million on their facility. And they basically took that budget and they went out and said, what can we get for $2.1 million? And that was what they ended up with. And it's a nice park. It has Jackie, you know more about it. Can you describe a little bit what they have?
I stopped by there one day when I was passing University, and they've got a nice splash pad right there inside of it, and they've got a basketball net that kids play on the side. They have a slide. They have a diving board. It's beautiful. They've got lots of colors, lots of shaded areas, and they did a really nice job. I was really
My understanding is they also have water features. This came up last night.
Oh,
which are they're like little fountains that are out in the water
Okay.
for the kids to play
it
around.
was off when I saw it, so I didn't see that.
That came up last night.
Oh, awesome. Love
The
that.
main thing is to make sure there's a really good swimming area more than just entertaining with basketball.
Oh, sure. I mean,
That's what we need here.
yes, it needs to be a swimming pool. It needs to be a swimming pool.
How's come they want to move the child waiting pool?
Well, the child waiting pool is no longer ADA compliant. And and I don't know the exact code that it violates, but I do know that it does not have its own filtration system. And for a wading pool to exist, it has to have its own filtration system. And that's kind of the beauty of a splash pad. A splash pad does not have to have its own separate filtration system. It's actually gray water. So it's fresh water coming in and then it goes straight into the sewer.
A lot of stuff's changed in the last 20 years.
Kids have a lot of fun with it. They have a lot of fun with the splash pads. I take my kids there and
There's a lot of
they
codes.
really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, if you'll remember, this pool used to drain into Hatfield Park.
And that's
That used to
fun.
drain into a pond.
A constant stream down there, and now that, just a few years ago, that had to be tied into the actual sewer system for the city of Alva, and it's pumped out for the sewer system now.
And that was part of the reason. We had, and were operating under a grandfather clause at one point in time. That clause was timed out, I believe. We were still kind of operating underneath it. But that's part of the reason why the health department shut it down, is because the code violations, the facility and the condition that it's in was just not manageable.
And if it was to be repaired, the percentage that has to be repaired voids out the grandfather clause no matter what, because too much has to be fixed.
So everything would have to be brought up to code. So I mean, it's just a challenge situation from that area. Does anyone have any more questions?
How long are we thinking in terms of before it'll be ready?
That was a question that was asked last night, and I think our best case scenario would be not next summer, but the summer after. So the summer of 2023 would be the best that we could probably do.
And part of the reason for that is the matching grant is not awarded until November. And so we wouldn't even know until end of November or December whether or not we had the matching funds to meet the other part of the obligation. And of course, you can't start pouring concrete and doing all that. We do the demolition part of it probably in the winter. But we wouldn't actually be able to be building the pool until spring of that year.
Not gonna be able to go swimming this summer then, are we?
No, doesn't sound like it.
Go in the spring.
Maybe you can have a bus that takes us to another pool in another small town. So people don't have to all individually drive there.
That's a thought. I don't know how we would coordinate that, but that would be something for city
Like
management.
Taiwan, partner on high school.
For anybody over the age of 14, the Wellness Center has a facility to swim in.
Right. But it's nice to be outdoors today.
Sure it is.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful pool, the one that he's referring to.
The fundraising we're going to have going on now for the arena, do you think that will affect the fundraising of this?
My understanding is the funds for the arena have already been raised.
Okay.
Funds for the arena have already been raised. It's just a matter of getting, I think they're trying to finance it so that the people that have provided funding don't have to provide that funding all at once, like Share Trust. Instead of having to dump millions of dollars in it at once, they finance it so that they can pay a little bit at a time.
Okay, we want people to feel free to look at anything they want to look at down here. If you want to see the filter house, we'll take you down there and show it to you. So that's up to you guys what you all want to do.
There's also surveys over here in the picnic area. If you guys will fill one out before you go, just 4
Yes.
quick questions.
Please fill out the survey for us. Do I have any takers for the filter?
Is there any way if we get it fixed, it will be open in 2 years?
Well, I think we might have looked, I think that's our best case scenario at this point.
What was it?
Huh?
What was it you said?
Could it be open in 2 years?
2 years.
So,
The best is 2 years.
let's see, it would be, yeah, at best it'd be 2 years. Not the summer, not next summer, but summer. So we want everyone to feel like this is a transparent process. If somebody wants to look at anything here in the pool, we will, please get a hold of the city manager, and she can get a hold of me, and we'll make arrangements to show you whatever you want to see. There's the results of the gutter leveling, or in the report there. If someone would want to try to duplicate those, we would encourage you all to do that, and we'd make arrangements to allow someone with a transit in here to try to duplicate those results. That's been a point of contention at times. So like I said, we want this to be a very transparent process, and if anyone has any questions or anything, they can certainly get to us through the city manager.
Been a lot of water went through in all these years.
It sure has. I mean, the pool holds 500,000 gallons,
Yeah.
which is 4 million pounds of water. The pool.
I've lived in this town all my life. I know. I was raised 3 blocks from here.
No, I was raised on 4th Street. We were up here.
I was on
every day.
that First Street.
We were up here almost every day in the summertime.
Our kids would too.
We live in East End town now, and all 3 of our kids would go up there swimming.
That was one of the things that came up in our initial survey that we did, our previous survey, was location of the pool. And I think it was 84% of the respondents want the pool right here. So that's pretty clear on what the community's thoughts are on that.
I just hope we can get it done.
We'll get it done. We'll get it done. There are too many people in the community that see this as a quality of life issue for our children. And I have lots of people stop and talk to me about that. I'm certain we'll get it done.
And we have people in our community whose children haven't learned to swim yet because I know there's an 8-year-old, for example, whose mom's looking for a teacher. And, that's pretty old, but not swimming yet.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
As a
something
safety
we've talked about it. Whenever the pool does get back up and running, having a pool manager coordinate swimming lessons or have somebody to teach them and bringing more events like we used to have, night swims for the adults. And so,
The community's going to be, in one way or another, investing in this facility, whether it's the operation